Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hey everyone, welcome back to Right on Track. Joining me today is a returning guest. This is his third time on the show, so you may recognize his voice. Please welcome Daniel Nesci. Hey Daniel.
Hello, good morning slash afternoon. How you going? How's everything over there?
I'm doing good. I hope you're doing well too, and it's not as early for you this time, so that's a good thing.
No, I think the last two times I've been on it was probably like 6, 7 a.m. It's 9 a.m. this time, so I'm much more awake and ready to go.
Perfect. Well, I'm so glad because we are going to be chatting all about networking and your music, and I'm very excited for this. But can you share with the listeners what you've been up to since the last time you were on? It's been a while, so what have you been up to?
Yeah, so I think the last time I was on was probably maybe like mid to late last year. In that time, I've gone to Utah. Um, I've worked on a collaborative album, which we'll talk about, later on. I did that, all in Utah, and after that, I've connected up with various new musicians in different realms of writing and production. I've produced another person's album here in Sydney. I've mixed and mastered the entire album I've worked on. I've been back to LA in that time as well for the NAMM convention that was in April of this year as well. And now I am in the process of a release cycle, working on some tracks for people and starting to gear up for the proper second half of this year, which I'm really excited for.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I've definitely seen you've been literally all over doing so many things. So exciting.
Yeah, no, everyone, all my friends, we went out a few weeks ago, and one of my friends said to me, "It's like I didn't even know you were back in Australia." So I've been, I've been around a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's so funny. Well, I'm so excited you're joining me today, and you've definitely had a lot of experience and success with networking. So I wanted to start in that area, and you have a great quote to read. So can you read that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just pulling that up here. If we create networks with the sole intention of getting something, we won't succeed. We can't pursue the benefits of networks. The benefits ensue from investments in meaningful activities and relationships. Adam Grant.
So why did you choose this one?
Especially in music, it's I've had like the good benefits of being sent free products and being given free software, and I've had some of those relationships continue to last. I've had some of those relationships die out, and I think at the core of them, whether they last or they don't last, to make them healthy and meaningful and growing investments for one another, the core of the relationship needs to come from the people, not the product. And there are periods of time where you'll go in and outs with brands and companies and people. But if you want to kick it off again, or you want to restart some kind of relationship, or just keep it growing over an extended period of time, I think you have to look at the core of who you're working with, not just what they supply.
Absolutely. Networking, I think when somebody is just getting started with networking, they can approach it as I need to connect with as many people as possible because the more people I know, the better. And it's great to have a lot of people in your corner and in your network, but it's more important to have a smaller group of people that you have genuine relationships with, that you're building these networks and these connections and you're watching those evolve, and that's leading to more opportunities rather than simply just knowing a bunch of people and just being on a name basis with a bunch of people and not really having a personal connection. Because I think that also what this quote's saying is this idea of going into it, especially with music, as well as what can this person do for me. It's all about me, me, me. That's how some people are, but you need to look at it as a mutual thing where what am I offering to this person? How can I help them and what they're trying to do? And in turn, how can they help me? And a lot of the times, I think when you're going into networking, it's really good to approach it as a personal connection first, not asking for something. And I've had a lot of experiences myself where I just reached out to somebody for one reason or another and just made a connection. And without me even having to ask for anything or suggest anything, they offered it on their own because they recognized it as me trying to make a genuine connection rather than being another hundredth person just trying to get something. So it's all based on the relationships.
Mm. I also like that's 100% of that is all like true and perfect. And it also depends like on another level on like what was the intent of reaching out. Because
Right.
there's different kinds of relationships. Like I have very different relationships with the people I collaborate with where I work one to one with them on tracks, on music. And then I have very different relationships with I guess people that represent something bigger. Like when I'm talking to an AR of a brand, I'm very conscious of the fact that they have an artist roster. Like, what am I providing? What can I provide? And what is too much of an ask? What is not enough of an ask? When it comes to receiving products from companies, when it comes to being able to provide content, being able to provide um, I guess value at the end of the day. Whereas with musicians and producers and mix engineers, whatever, are you coming to them in the sense of a position of let me pay you for a service? Because that's networking too. Like having the ability to approach someone you want to work with and be able to successfully negotiate and communicate rates. Although it might be a service, there's a level of networking there. You're building a relationship and establishing, a potential partnership, a working relationship for the long term. And then sometimes you might be working with someone where it is more of a partnership, where maybe you're not paying them for their time, but it's with the intent that you're doing this together. So I think it's understanding what kind of relationship and what kind of networking you actually doing when you're doing it in the moment as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I definitely think there are many different relationships as you just described. And I completely agree that even if you're paying somebody for a service, that's definitely networking as well. Because what's coming to mind is my producer connected me with my guitarist, my drummer, and the guy who does pedal steel for me. And so he helped me expand my musicians who play on my tracks just from working with him. And so that's a great example of, just because I'm paying him for my production and my studio time, that's not the only thing that he's doing. We're friends and he helps me with other things too. And so I think just approaching whatever relationship you're in with what exactly the relationship is and what your intent is really really important. So networking is something that comes up all the time in music. Like you have to be able to network and you have to be open to it and approach it mindfully in order to be successful. And just in general, what are your thoughts on why networking is so important and why it's something that all artists should focus on?
Because I think that whether or not you're a solo artist, a producer, or a mixer, collaboration is almost entirely like the core of what this industry is. Like I don't think there is a way in music to get where you might want to be completely on your own. Like it doesn't happen. Even and I'm not just talking about independent artists or label artists or everything. Like there is a level of collaboration at every step of this way. I mean, even if you're just getting people that aren't necessarily musicians to listen to your music, there is still a degree of like, I've got a trusted network of people who can hear and judge my music before it's out there. Like, I don't think you can get through any stage of this without a network. I mean, even like right before I was on this call, I was talking to a good friend of mine who's based out of like Austin, and he's 10, 15 years ahead of me career wise. Like he's older and everything. And it's always great to be able to have, very honest conversations with him because we have a bit of crossover with the brands and stuff that, we both like right now. And I was literally asking him a genuine question about a brand that we both have connected up with, that he's worked with for longer than me. And I asked him, it's like, what is it that they like from the people that they work with? Like, what do they want? like what have you found that they want? And it's like even that example, networking for the sake of other networking. I can't tell you, like, I had sessions in LA before I was back here that literally came about because of like three other connections, that transpired back like 2 years worth of time. Having one conversation with a person could lead to an opportunity 2 years later in this industry. And I think it's important to be aware of that, so you're not treating anyone any less or any more just because of what they have or haven't done. So I think the reason why it's so important is because it's literally everything. Like, it is everything in this industry to know people, and more importantly, for them to know you.
Right. Absolutely. And I love what you said there, sort of in passing toward the end about it doesn't really matter if somebody is this huge, massive no name or if it's somebody smaller, because that smaller person, they could wake up tomorrow and break through. And if you like went out burning bridges and ghosted people because you didn't think they were big enough to offer you anything, like that's just a missed opportunity. And so I think it's really important to respect everybody because everyone in this industry with good intentions has something to offer and a passion for music and working with other people. And so you don't want to give bad vibes and turn people away just because they're not at a level that you perceive as successful yet because you're trying to get there yourself. And I completely agree that it's impossible to be in the music industry without doing any kind of networking. But another thing too, I think we can touch on briefly is that there are some people out there who don't have good intentions and will take advantage of independent artists who are trying to get somewhere by offering them something or just approaching them with some kind of offer, and it turns out to be not legit and a bad situation to get in. And so I think that artists who are just starting out, we may be a little desperate to get places, but you also need to be aware that there are some people out there who don't have good intentions and to try not to go down those roads that aren't good and get into contracts you can't get out of and all of those things. So just be aware of the red flags when you can and look out for those situations.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, this is probably not what lots of artists want to hear, but to be honest, I feel like a lot of the responsibility is on the artist. Like, I don't think this industry's fair, and I don't think it should be fair, to be honest. I never have thought that, even as someone who's not signed with a label. I have worked on music that has been for labels, and I've signed contracts, to release my performances, and I get everything checked. Like, I have a lawyer specifically for music, and he reviews and he reads everything, and I do the due diligence to make sure that I'm not screwed over, in a proper way. Obviously, there are relationships and things I've had. Even one relationship I have right now, it's been great for like a year, and then all of a sudden I've just heard nothing from them, and that's sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes that just happens, and you take the punches, and then you just keep going with your work. But I think, like, when it comes to the level of networking where you're dealing with contracts and you're dealing with actual agreements, I think like that steps beyond networking. Like, that steps into a new realm of negotiation. And I think an artist needs to do their due diligence, with like a legal consult, with someone who knows more than them. I mean, at the end of the day, I'd say 90% of us, we're musicians. We have our area of expertise, and legal and contracts, we might know what we want, but when you've got very ambiguous jargon, when you've got, lots of phrases that you don't necessarily understand. I mean, I don't think most people understand, what points mean in a context of like song royalties. If you say to people, I'm going to mix this, I'm going to take X amount of points. Sometimes I don't think people can distinguish different types of royalties versus publishing rights and the mastering rights. Like, if you don't understand that, don't be proud. Go get the help. And if you don't do that, then to be honest, it is on you. Um, like, I don't think being screwed over is exclusive to the music industry.
No.
And I think that other industries do a lot better job at getting the help they need to make sure they don't get screwed over.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know whether it's because musicians are too proud, whether they're ignorant to the fact that people don't want to help them. Whatever it is, I've met lots of musicians who have signed like very interesting deals, and had very interesting, not very good relationships. But they've had points of time at which they could have turned around, and they didn't. And my opinion of that has always been like, well, if you didn't take the time to turn around then it's kind of on you.
Right.
And I think that is a skill in networking too, being able to recognize what's actually happening around you at a bigger picture. Like, what are they saying versus what are they doing? If they're saying XYZ is going to happen, but then ABC is actually happening, how long do you like allow it to continue on in that way? Like, how long do you hold out for that big break? Like, I think there's a lot of optimism in music networking when there should probably be more realism and be treated more like business, less like friendship.
Right. No, I completely agree, 100%. And I think it's so important to, like, whenever you're approached with anything or find yourself in a situation where maybe a contract will be involved, not only like getting a lawyer or somebody to look at it, but also like talk to people who've worked with them, talk to other clients and get their experience. And if they are doing what they say they're doing, you see on their online presence, they're having these successes and the clients are having things to show for what this company is saying they're doing, then that's a good thing. But if it's not, then run away. But I really like what you said too earlier about how, musicians, we have our expertise. We're musicians, we're artists. And I think that's why it's so important to have a network of people who are skilled in other areas, whether that's, someone who knows music engineering and mastering, and a graphic designer, a web developer, a photographer, videographer, all these things that we don't know how to do. That's all part of networking too, like meeting the right people and making these connections in order to further your career and get you the content that you need. So, before we shift gears into talking about your music, just can you give a couple tips on when somebody's struggling to get started with networking? Maybe they're nervous or they're introverted and they just don't really know how to start. What advice would you give?
Yeah. And my other like my other thing that I'll just add on to what you
Okay,
last
go
said
ahead.
too, is that you don't need to be good at everything, but I think it is important to have a little bit of knowledge in all
Right,
those areas. Like if you're, building a site, graphic artist, whatever, have a little bit of knowledge so that if they're doing something less than ideal, you know how to properly communicate what you want.
right.
Like I think, it's easy to say I want XYZ, but if you're able to talk in their language, their skill, like if you're at a photo shoot or you're doing a music video and say, like, I don't like this kind of shot, let's try this kind of shot, have a little bit of background info. I think it just shows a level of, professionalism and vision to have a little bit more info outside of your world.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
back to what you said, tips, right? For
Yes.
kind of introverted and first started people. Well, for context, I'm in Australia where there's basically very little networking to do here that doesn't involve overseas people. So every piece of networking I've done has had to be like a big ask from the get go, and that's spiraled and snowballed into a lot of things. I think like here's the truth. Like, don't tell someone, "Oh, this might happen," or this, don't tell people about the things that might happen or the big thing that could happen. Tell people what you've done because they'll assess the quality of what you've done already and be able to like move on from that. And I am not opposed to suggestions. Like I have emailed companies that I've liked, I've shown them the work I've done, and then suggested, hey, send me out X and I'll do this. And sometimes I've heard back, sometimes I haven't. And to be honest, I've done a lot of different bits of gear demoing and gear content in the last year. And that's pretty much all been from like emailing on both party sides. I think like the key tips is to just be very honest about where you're at in your career right now, because I think a brand would appreciate you being honest about where you're at and see potential in you for growth rather than you saying, "Oh, I'm working on this thing. It's gonna be the next huge thing." And then they're probably going to make fun of you, or they're just going to be like, okay, well, can't wait for that. And then what happens if that doesn't happen? And they'll be like, well, you promised X, Y, Z. Well, you haven't delivered. So I think being honest is very, very key. Don't be nervous to just, you know, reach out. Like if you're a genuine, like, don't reach out to places for the sake of just reaching out. Don't reach out to people for the sake of reaching out. Reach out with a clear intent in mind, because you might reach out and then they'll be like, great, so what do you want to do from here? And it's like, oh, I never had a purpose, I just wanted to reach out. So having a very clear intent, being very honest with where you're at right now as opposed to where you could be going forward. I also think that just I'm trying to think in the sense of like just starting out. um, don't be afraid to get a no. You're going to get a lot of them. Like if you reach out to 10 brands, be happy with one or two getting back to you. If that, like, genuinely, that might not even happen in the first place. And I also wouldn't recommend reaching out to people or brands or stuff that you just don't know anything about, like you're reaching out for the sake of it. Like all the companies and brands that I've partnered up with, I've pretty much known a lot about them for a long time. It's the same with the people I work with. Like I'll meet someone and then they'll tell me about some person, and then I'll go do a little digging and reading on what they've done and who they are, and make a judgment on not whether I want to work with them, but whether or not I'd actually be able to provide anything at all. Because if they're, you know, in a completely, if for me, for example, if they're a country producer working on country music, that's probably one of two genres I genuinely know nothing about. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know that's like for your genre,
Yeah.
but like it's a genre of music I've genuinely never worked in. So I'm not going to reach out to a country producer and be like, "Hey, let me work with you on XYZ," because I know absolutely nothing, and this would just be a cool name to work with. Um, so I think all of those things, like in summary, being honest, being intentful, being very truthful with where you're at this point in time, not being afraid to get no's, and not being afraid to hear nothing back. Like there's a lot of uncertainty with taking those kinds of chances on reaching out to people. And the bigger you grow and you focus on your craft, the more likely you are to get something back in return.
Absolutely. I love all of your advice, and I especially like the whole be honest thing because I always say in the music to be authentic, but that goes for your public image and your networking as well. It's really important to be authentic and really show who you really are. Don't try to play things up if that's not your reality. So that's really, really important overall. So great advice, Daniel. Love it. So just to wrap up, I know you released two singles and you have an album coming. So can you briefly share what listeners can expect from these singles and the album and the whole process behind this?
Yeah, so on what date was it? It would be a little while ago now. It would have been like June 16th. We released our first single, Odyssey, which featured like Norwegian composer Daniel Herkensdale, which was awesome. And then, yeah, and then on June 30th, we released Sweetest Thing featuring American vocalist Devin Barris. He was great. He wrote the lyrics, did the vocals on that. And then on July 14th, we've got the album coming out called The Flats, named after the Bonneville Salt Flats, because we wrote the initial album pretty much all in Utah while I was there. The collaborative album is between myself and Jeff Slaw, who's an American DJ and producer. He's done some awesome stuff. He's opened for Justin Bieber and Tory Lanez. He's the DJ at the Utah Jazz VIP Club. He does all these awesome gigs around, like he's done stuff at Pride festivals, and he's done stuff at collegiate gigs and everything. Like he's a champion. He's a good friend of mine, and I love collaborating with him every chance I get. So Odyssey, the first track, very ambient, very chill vibes, very kind of picturesque soundscape. Sweetest Thing, very poppy, very alternative 1975 vibes. And they're kind of the two like polar opposite ends of this album. The album's basically just whatever we felt like we did it. And majority of it is ambient soundscapes. The first track's very short and it opens up the album. The second is more groovy. It's got a nice, feel about it. And we'll have remixes coming out too of that second track going forward. The third's more orchestral. The fourth's kind of like a little bit more of a cool hip hoppy groove. The fifth is Odyssey, the sixth is Sweetest Thing, and the seventh and the eighth are really nice ambient closes as well. So it's kind of like everything that we would want to do that we feel like doing that we never get to do because we're doing other projects and Jeff's doing other performances and sets. We've done on this album, and I think it's triggering the start of me personally starting to collaborate with a range of artists. I think going forward, that's going to be the plan, just because of how much fun I've had doing this. And overall, yeah, Jeff and I produced and wrote everything together. We did it over about 10 days in Utah, and then over like the last 4 or so months refined everything. And then I handled the mix and mastering of the entire production, which was a lot of fun because going forward, I want to start picking up more mixed clients that I'm not producing their records, just mixing. Yeah.
That's so cool. Shout out to you for doing the mixing and mastering too. That goes completely over my head. I have mad respect for my producer who does that for me too. I've never really understood that. So that's amazing for you how you are so involved with every aspect of the music creation process.
Yeah, I actually just filmed a few days ago that'll by the time this episode's out, this will be out on YouTube. Basically a 40-minute video breaking down the entire session and mix of Odyssey. It was not a hard mix. I think it only had like 30, 40 stems, which compared to some of like the orchestral mixing I've had to do of lately is quite tame. But I've really enjoyed mixing and mastering, and to be honest, like, sending that mix off for Daniel to hear, and like for him to say back, it sounds great. Like someone who's been working in the industry for much longer than I am, it's great to hear, sending those mixes to Jeff and having very few revisions. It's a lot of fun, and it's made me want to pick up like proper mix clients outside of just producing their records and then mixing stuff. Like I want to pick up mix clients just for mixing as a result of like doing this album, because it was a whole other experience, as well as sequencing the album for mastering, like putting all the metadata in, getting all the transitions between each song. Like it was, and doing like, not that we will do a vinyl press and everything, we don't know, but actually mastering for vinyl, mastering for CD, and then for streaming too, like understanding the differences between the three as well.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So it sounds like you had a great experience with this whole project, but what's some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
I actually don't think, like, I think this is one of the most unproblematic things I've ever had to do in music. Like, it was actually like Jeff and I have just got a great rapport. I mean, I feel like half the time it's just us joking, but like when it comes down to it, he is a great musician. And it's easy to work with him. He gets stuff done when I need him to, and he'll do things and I'll do things. Well, even in this call, I've seen messages like pop up through him that I'll reply to after. Like we're in constant communication, despite being across the other side of the world, which is an example of a networking relationship, because I worked with his brother years ago in my old band, and he introduced Jeff to me for a remix that Jeff did in my old band. And now here we are doing an entire collaborative album. And it's my first solo release. It's not Jeff's first solo release, but it's my one under my own name. Like I actually don't think there were many challenges, and I think that's because we set very clear like what we both wanted out of this release early. Like we wanted different things out of this release, and we made those very, very clear. And we found like a midpoint. Like I wanted this for my catalog. I wanted to mix and master this for my portfolio. He wanted to create some awesome stuff. He will use these for his live sets. Like there's that understanding from the get-go. It was very clear intentions straight away. So I think anything that could have been issues were avoided very early.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think, what you said for the whole networking thing too, like you have that communication. Communication is key in any kind of relationship, but especially when you're getting into business relationships and these collaborations, making your intent clear, but also, recognizing that it's a collaborative effort and there's more than one person involved. And so making sure that, the wants and needs of everyone is being met and you're respecting each other's wishes and you're coming into this project with a very clear goal. And so I think that it's great to hear that you didn't have any train wreck moments because you're right, you avoided all of them because you had that open communication, you had your goals in place and you knew what you were working toward. And so there were probably never any moments of misunderstandings or unclear objectives because you had that all sorted out before you even started.
Yeah, and as well, keeping everything in-house, meaning that was, the only expenses we had for this album were just, paying a few features for their time. That's basically it. Like, you know, having Jeff and I write and produce everything, and then having, the mix and master done completely in-house, to turn out as great as it has, for an album that, if you didn't have the features would have been entirely free, is really hard in music. Like, I don't think a lot of people can say my album would have cost me nothing if I had like no features. um and I think that's another thing, like when you have a skill set between like the people working on it that can cover literally everything you need from like conception to end, it makes things a lot easier because we didn't have to have a conversation about who we're going to get to mix, who we're going to get to produce, who we're going to get to do this, because we just did it all in house. So I think like a lot of the normal hurdles that would have come with this release, you know, was pretty much like kind of overridden. Even the artwork is all photos we took from the trip that I've just edited and put into frames in Photoshop, and done a little bit of processing on them. Like every possible thing that I know that artists fight about, because I've been in bands and stuff, was kind of irrelevant in this situation.
Well, congratulations on this whole project. I'm sure that I know you've been working on this for a while and you've been excited about this whole project. So I'm very excited for you and I can't wait to hear the whole album when it's out.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So, just to wrap things up, what is one more piece of advice that you would like to share about networking tied to your whole experience with this album?
Focus on long-term connection. I think that's, you know, I've been friends with Jeff for a while now. We spoke about doing this and we just did it. And just because, we've finished this album, maybe we'll do another one down the line. Maybe we won't. But regardless, if we ever work on music again with one another, we will still be in like constant communication. Like, it's a long-term network. It's a long-term relationship that we have. Focus on the long term. I don't think you can get anything out of music in a short burst.
Perfect. Perfect piece of advice to end on. Daniel, it was lovely having you on again. You're always welcome on the show. Can you share with everyone where they can find you online and listen to your music?
Yes, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram, DJ Nesci. My middle name is Joshua, by the way. I'm not a DJ. Everyone gets that. Um, you can find me on Facebook with the same tag. On Spotify and iTunes streaming services, you can find myself just as Nesci, Nesci. You'll see Jeff Slaw and I's collaboration out soon. Then same on YouTube, DJ Nesci as well. And then for anyone that has any actual, mix master inquiries, you can reach me at danielnesci.com, which has kind of um, my latest works, company collaborations, a little bit more in depth about me, which is another new thing. I've built that site more recently. So people can reach out and contact me there as well, or just at danielnescimusic@gmail.com. Either way.
Perfect. Can I just say your last name is perfect for an artist name? Neshi is so perfect. You got so lucky.
Yeah, when we were talking about it, he was like, "Oh, you're just gonna go with with Daniel Nesci or DJ Nesci, I'm like, I'm just cutting all that out. It's just gonna be Nesci. Like I'm just like I can hear that going forward.
It's so good. It's so good. Well, it was awesome having you back again. I loved our chat. Congrats on the album. So excited to hear it. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Daniel Nesci. And of course, until next time,
Stay
stay
right
right
on
on
track.
track.